Hello, I'm your host, Brian Callanan. Seattle has a new police chief who's hoping to bring some stability to a law enforcement agency that's had a challenging last 5 years.
Public safety certainly is a priority for everyone.
Shon Barnes, Madison, Wisconsin's former police chief, takes over the same job in Seattle, a city with some rocky recent history to get past.
I want to thank the men and women of the Seattle Police Department for their hard work.
Barnes' predecessor, Adrian Diaz, was asked to step down following allegations of discrimination and harassment.
What's going on? Your ass!
And the chief before that, Carmen Best, resigned in the wake of the George Floyd protests and the abandonment of SPD's East Precinct.
This year, Chief Barnes will begin implementing the stratified policing initiative.
Seattle leaders are counting on their new chief to make a new start, increasing officer hiring, especially for female cops, and helping the city's newly expanded 911 alternative teams to thrive.
Designing alternative response in a city of this size and complexity is not a small undertaking.
Plus, there are the hurdles of ending a federal consent decree that's hung over the SPD for 13 years and implementing a controversial new surveillance system.
There's no panacea. We have to piece things together.
We're going one-on-one with Chief Shon Barnes to learn about his top priorities.
Big part of my job is to make sure that we establish trust with the community.
Getting behind the badge with the SPD's new chief. Next on City Inside Out. Welcome once again to City Inside Out here on the Seattle Channel. I'm Brian Callanan, and with me I am joined by Seattle's new police chief, Shon Barnes. Chief, thanks a lot for being here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, Brian.
Well, Chief, I want to get into this right away by asking why you took this job, because I'm sure you're aware the SPD has been through a bit of a roller coaster over the last 5 years when it comes to chiefs resigning or being asked to resign. What was it about this job that said to you, I want to go there?
Well, you know, here's the thing about roller coasters. You have your ups and your downs, your highs and your lows. And right now, I see a police department that's certainly on its way up. I see a police department that's really looking for a little direction and to really amplify the things that the department does well. I've known about the Seattle Police Department all my career. I've had friends who have gone through the ranks here at the police department. I have friends who are former chiefs and executives here, and they all speak very highly of the police department. When the opportunity presented itself, I did my due diligence, and the thing that really put it over the top was speaking with some members of council, speaking with the mayor, looking at the staff, and I knew that this was a place where I could grow and I could also grow the police department.
Okay. And I want to talk about the main priorities you're bringing to this job, because back in February, you talked to the City Council's Public Safety Committee about this. You were talking about these 5 main priorities here: crime prevention, community partnerships, retention and recruitment, employee safety and wellness, and continuous improvement. I heard the professor in you coming out on that one, and it was good to hear. Let's start with this crime prevention piece, because the mayor called this out in his recent State of the City address, saying you're going to be implementing something called stratified policing. I want you to explain what that is, if you could, and how it would provide different results than the hotspot policing or the emphasis patrols that Seattle's used in years past.
Yeah, so stratified policing really has been around for a while. We will adapt some version of it, but it will be for Seattle specific. So we're calling it Seattle-centric. That will be the name of our crime reduction strategy, our crime plan, Seattle-centric. And what it does is it combines the things that most police departments do well, which is problem solving, when it's assigned to a certain group or a certain person to be responsible for that. And we'll be going through that particular process. And so stratified policing simply means that we understand the priorities of a community, of a neighborhood at that level, and that we understand how to identify those crimes or things that are contributing to disorder, and that we're working in partnership with other people to prevent those or to solve those. And so the idea is the prevention of crime.
Got it. And I'm going to talk about the community partnerships in a little bit, but I feel like you might be going down a path that I did want to touch on here. working with the CARE department. This is new for the city of Seattle. The Community Assisted Response and Engagement Department is one of the city's 3 public safety departments, along with police and fire. So CARE operates the 911 center, as you know, has these teams of community crisis responders, I should say, mental health care experts who are going out in the field there. 911 calls come in, they're screened, dispatchers say, all right, let's send out the crisis responders. They go with police. Can you tell me about how this system might be a game changer? It just spread citywide very recently before we're having this interview. How's that going to change things, do you think?
Yeah, so I'm familiar with this process in Madison, where it came from. We had the same thing. It was called CARES, a little bit different.
You can learn this one,
Yeah,
then, I guess. Yeah.
certainly, yeah. But I think when it comes to crime prevention, quality of life issues, there are certain things that we know. And we know that when police work in partnerships with professionals who are specially trained to deal with certain community problems, we get a better result. And so we're not replacing police officers. We're not replacing the work of police officers. We're supplementing that work with people who are licensed and trained and professionals, and we're working hand in hand. I can list probably maybe 10 other things that I would like for people to go out with us on. I'd love to have people from code enforcement working with the police department when we go to issues. I'd love to see people from social services or from child protective services, or people who are there to provide information to go with us, because sometimes we have to do research and give people the answer. And so that's really my vision, I think, for Seattle-centric policing, is that we're going to be working more in partnerships, but we're not here to replace, I think, the police. We're not here to replace the job that we do. I don't want my police officers coming to work every day only to deal with things that require a badge and a gun.
Yeah.
I didn't sign up, no one really did, to take people to jail and run out. Like, we'll do that from time to time.
Yeah.
But this job is really about helping the community. This job is really about showing people who we are as human beings. I spoke with a group of people today from before the badge.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I told them is, I want you to continue being the person that we hired.
And before the badge is that police academy that the SPD puts on.
Absolutely.
Right?
And I said, continue being who you are. We hired you because you had a heart to help people. Then continue to do that. And so I need to do my part and provide a police department where they can do just that.
One wrinkle here, I know there's been some talk about, hey, maybe we should send out these CARE responders by themselves, solo dispatch rather than dual dispatch with police. Have you reckoned with that piece of it yet?
I really haven't, because, I think that gets into the politics of who should do what. And to be honest with you, I'm really about the work and making sure that our community is safe.
Okay, all right. I'm sure we'll touch on that one again in the future at some point. I wanted to go back on this idea of community partnerships, if I could. You're in a city now that's more than twice as big as Madison, where you left. You're probably going to need a lot more partners, I would think. What are some of the partnerships you want to build on? Which do you see as the most valuable to you in the SPD?
Well, I think the biggest partnership is partnerships with our elected officials. People want to know, when I show up to places, who has access to resources. They want me to show up because they know that I have access to moving police resources. But I can't change the fact that there's no sidewalks.
Right, the built environment.
I can't do that. And so building those partnerships is important, because one of the things that you will see with Seattle-centric policing is that we're going to really get down to a grassroots kind of level of understanding when it comes to crime and public safety in the community, and a lot of things that they want or that they think are related to crime and disorder, we quite frankly have no say in. But we can always work as a good partner and let people know what the community is saying. And I want people to be informed. I want them to know what we can and what we can't do and what we're working on.
Got it. And I wanted to talk about some of the community nonprofit groups that you work with, too. I keep thinking of groups like We Deliver Care, which is out there on 3rd Avenue, really trying to help clean up some of the street disorder. Can you touch on that partnership? Because I think that's an important part for police, too.
Sure. So in my former life, I came from a city that had over 3,000 nonprofits, 5% of which had a budget of over $1 million. And at first, it was this competition for resource. It was like, well, don't fund the police, fund me. And what I was able to do was to create partnerships to say, with our data, with our grant writing program,
Yeah.
we can help you get the funds that you need, and we can work together. And in my last year, we had at least $1.2 million in pass-through grants that we applied for, but we gave that money to other nonprofits so that they can do the work.
Okay.
And so pass-through grants is really one of the things that I want to elevate in our police department, because a lot of times the government will give grants to us, and then we can give that to other people and help with some of the work that we want to do.
Thank you for breaking that down, too. I wanted to jump back to crime rates, if I could, with you real quick. Seattle was a bit of an outlier for a while in criminal activity. Our violent crime rates were remaining higher than several large U.S. cities after the pandemic. They're starting to come back down now, but the King County prosecutor recently reported on this, some alarming stats on gun violence. I wanted to talk about this. Victims under 18, the report says, made up 15% of all shooting victims in our area in 2024. That number has doubled since 2019. The report also shows people of color feeling the brunt of gun violence. They made up 76% of shooting victims last year. Can you talk about what those numbers say to you and what you can do about them?
Yeah, you know, we've been here before. We've seen gun violence go up and go down. I think right now gun violence is certainly trending down, but certainly not acceptable by my standards or anybody else's standards. What we know about gun violence is that there is a way to reverse gun violence. And the first thing you have to do is identify those persons who are, if you will, influencing other people to commit gun violence. Like, what is it about their presence that's causing them? And we have to identify them, we have to hold them accountable, or we have to get them the help that they need to stay off of it. Then we have to look at those persons who may be in or around them, and we have to make sure that we give them something to do and a direction. If these kids don't believe that Seattle is a place for them, they're going to pick up a gun. If they don't believe that Seattle is a place where they can be successful, where they can have the same opportunities as your kids and my kids, that's what's going to happen. There is a way to reverse that, and we're going to be working that as part of our crime reduction plan.
Got it. And I think you're going down a path that I'd like to keep going if I could, because I remember during your final days as chief in Madison, you had to respond to this awful shooting at the Abundant Life School there, the Christian school, where 3 people died, including the 15-year-old shooter. 6 were wounded. After that, you talked about wanting to have police officers in our public schools, but you know that's been a contentious issue here in Seattle for the school district and its families. I know you've been a public school teacher too, so I wanted to try to have an understanding of this. You've been a teacher, you've been a school resource officer, as I understand it. Should we have SROs in Seattle schools?
I'm sitting here today because of my school resource officer. As a public school teacher, I lost a student to gun violence. One of my most promising students decided to pick up a gun with another person, and they committed a homicide. And I lost him forever. And it bothered me so much that the only person I could turn to talk about it with was my school resource officer. We sat in my classroom, in that history classroom, and we talked about what we can do to help kids and to keep them out of trouble. At the end of that conversation, he says, "You should be a police officer." I was like, "Really?" He was like, "We need more people who think the way you do." And the rest is history. I do believe that when done correctly, a school resource officer program certainly can benefit our students. And when the key word is resource and not officer.
Yeah, what does that look like?
It looks like someone who is in the school system, perhaps not in uniform, or a softer uniform is what they sometimes say.
Yeah.
It looks like someone that has the resources and the understanding to identify kids that may be in crisis or may need help. It looks like someone that has a cell phone full of phone numbers that I wish every police officer had, but maybe they have a special resource list that can get things for people. As my experience as a school resource officer, you know, I was able to get food, clothing, things like that for kids, and I have an amazing story. Next time, I can't tell you now, it's a long one, but it's a good one, about my experience as an SRO that I would love to share with you. And just briefly, I got a letter from prison from a lady who said that she was in prison and that she had prayed that someone would take care of her kids. And what had happened was I saw the kids with no coats during one of our famous ice storms in North Carolina. I was able to get them a coat. And I remember her because we have the same last name.
Oh, wow.
Her last name is Barnes.
Okay.
But here's where it gets interesting. I arrested her, and I had no idea that those were her children. So I say this to say the program, when done correctly, does really provide a service to our children, making sure that they're safe. You mentioned what happened at Abundant Life.
Yeah.
I can't tell you that an SRO would or would not have made a difference in that, right? That was probably one of the worst days in my professional career. But it was one of the best days because I had a well-trained, well-prepared police department that handled it with the best care that I've ever seen in policing. They did an amazing job that day. And so, yes, I am in support if it's done well, if it's done in cooperation with the community, if there's an MOU about what they are or are not supposed to do, and if there's any ambiguity about that, they know who to call to get an answer.
The memorandum of understanding. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a lot of acronyms that always fly around here. Thank you for that. Chief, let me jump back on one more issue with crime prevention. I want to talk about the new technology that SPD is bringing on board, the real-time crime center, things of this nature. 20 surveillance cameras will soon be going up, as you know, in the Chinatown ID area. The city's also planning to have cameras on North Aurora, 3rd Avenue, too. Do you support the use of surveillance cameras? Have you seen them be effective in other places where you've held leadership roles?
Well, I don't know what a surveillance camera is, but I do know what a public space camera is.
All right,
and
all right.
Public space cameras are in places that there's no expectation of privacy. You're out in public. There's not a lot of places that you can go in this city and many others where you're not on camera somewhere. I will tell you, in my former employ, we use a lot of public space cameras to solve a lot of crimes, including a horrific stranger rape and kidnapping. And so, yes, but if they're not manned properly, if there's not good oversight, we're going to make sure that we have a policy that everyone agrees on. Because I don't want them just to be reactive, because that means that something has already happened. But if we can get resources in the area because we see something that doesn't look right, or we see someone who's about to get hurt, or we see someone that may need medical attention, I think it will certainly be a benefit for our community. Certainly there's no panacea to crime and social disorder, but we have to piece things together and create one strong system that's going to keep people in Seattle safe.
I just wanted to go down this path a little further because you've seen the research on this. The ACLU has done this and said, well, this doesn't really help with violent crimes. It might help with property crimes a little bit, but they did a pretty massive longitudinal study about this. Do you have some concerns about that and just in bringing this program to Seattle, I guess?
I really don't, and I don't disagree with preventing violent crime. It's tough because when people are intent on doing bad things, no camera or sign will do anything. I worked in Greensboro.
Where didn't you work? Okay.
Yeah. That's where I started my career. For almost 20 years in a time where things were really, really rough. And I've seen people commit shootings where they knew police were in the parking lot, right? So when people are intent on doing bad things, there's very little you can do. So it could be a little unfair to say it doesn't prevent crime, but if we can stop someone from doing one thing that turns to two becoming four becoming 8, then maybe it is a good thing to look at. But again, there's no panacea. We have to piece things together in order to create a safe Seattle. I think that's what people want.
Yeah, it's an interesting new tool. I know a lot of people are going to be paying close attention that are also paying close attention to officer retention and recruitment. I can move on here. So for the first time in 5 years, we've been talking about this in the city quite a bit, the SPD did not lose more officers than it hired in 2024. The margin there was just 1 officer, so clearly there's some work to do there, still to do. The city council raised salaries for officers last year. That was a big deal, helped bring more interest to the job, certainly. What plans do you have to hire and retain more officers?
I think it's about telling the story of the Seattle Police Department. I went to a briefing today and I spoke with some officers, and officers said, Chief, what we want from you is, can you tell the community about the good things that we do, about the times we de-escalate and about the time we use our good training and tactics to keep people safe. And it is about branding. It's about letting people know that this is a different Seattle Police Department, a different time. We're made up of the same people who are resilient, who are tough, who want to do the right thing, and let that be the story. I had an opportunity, of course, as chief, to swear in new police officers. The first police officer I swore in was a lateral from Madison. And I spoke with him, and he sent me his resignation during the time I was announced. I thought he was playing.
Interesting.
And he's like, no, I'm actually going to Seattle. So
Like the college coach, he was following you to the other team. Okay,
He wasn't following me, but
Yeah.
he was following the city because he had come to visit, fell in love with it. It's like, I want to work there. And so him and his wife moved here. I think it's going to be an excellent police officer for us. And, you know, I've gotten calls from all over the country. I got a call from Atlanta, a friend of mine that I went to Southern Police Institute with. Said, hey, my son wants to lateral to Seattle. And so people know that this is a great place to come and work. But on the retention piece, I don't want to skip over that.
Yeah.
I want the officers to know, number one, that they're supported not only by me, but by an amazing community, by our elected officials, and that we're going to give them the resources that they need to do their job, and we're going to invest in them to do the job the right way.
And this sounds a lot like the safety and wellness piece that I know was part of your presentation back
Absolutely.
in February, trying to make sure you're improving that for officers, sworn officers and non-sworn staff too. I want to talk about this balance between making sure your team feels supported, which is very important here, so people don't want to leave, et cetera, but also balancing that and officer morale, et cetera, with this need for officer accountability. This is a balance, Chief, and I wanted to know about that and how you approach that.
I believe accountability starts before an incident happens. That's how you support people. You support people by making sure they have the tools, training, technology, team to get the job done. That's my definition of accountability. Where you're talking about is corrective action, and people get the two mixed up.
Okay.
Yes, we're going to correct your action if your action is improper. They know that. But if I don't do that, then I'm not supporting my police officers. If I don't let them know that, hey, you missed the mark on this, let's figure out how to fix it, then I'm not supporting them. And if I'm not supporting them, then we can't have the type of community and the type of police department that we truly need and deserve.
Okay. Let me move on to another piece here. We're getting short on time, but we've got so much to cover here. I want to talk about officers, keeping officers safe and the public safe, too, with this whole topic of crowd management, the use of so-called less lethal weapons. Council passed a measure last month, as you know, allowing officers to use weapons like tear gas, pepper spray, blast balls to manage crowds in limited situations here. Another contentious issue here, a split vote for the council on this. What do you want the public to know about the way you're going to handle when and how officers use these kind of tools?
The idea is to never have to use these tools on American citizens or on community members at large. That is the key. Doing things like using community dialogue officers, using our poet teams, using community members or anyone else who wants to help to make sure that people know, hey, if you're upset, you have the right to protest, you have the right to assemble, but we have to do that safely and we have to do that peacefully without the destruction of property or without people being hurt. You know, I tell people, 2020 is really not a good example of crowd management because, we never, I think in the history of certainly since I've been in police, have we seen things come together like the frustration of a pandemic, the frustration of an economy, the frustration of the police. Where
all
police,
at one time,
At one time, where police are the subject of the actual protests. And I hope we never see that again. But I will do everything in my power to prevent that. Part of my job, big part of my job, is to make sure that we establish trust with the community so that we can let people know what's going on with certain things, that we can speak out about things too. I mean, a lot of police chiefs, when something happens in another part of the country, I see stuff that shocks my conscience. I don't mind speaking out and saying, hey, not only is this wrong, but what the community wants to hear is, Chief, what are you going to do to prevent this from happening here? And too many chiefs didn't say anything. They didn't talk about their policy. We've had a policy in North Carolina for years about not choking people and all this other kind of thing. And people didn't know it because we didn't talk about it. So again, part of it is branding, letting people know what the Seattle Police Department brand is, what we stand for, what we do not stand for.
Can you touch on one piece for me here? Because there's another challenge for a city in our nation right now, how local police officers interact with federal immigration officials who are currently working on the Trump administration's mass deportation plan. Seattle's a city of immigrants. About 1 out of every 5 people who lives here was born in another country. You wrote about this not too long ago and put out a press release about it. I thought it was very interesting. Talk about that, and what are you telling your officers about this?
We will stay consistent to who we are as Seattle police officers. We don't have a relationship with ICE. We've never had a relationship with ICE. We're not asking about immigration status. You know, we're going about doing our job. We want people to feel comfortable to call the police if they're victimized or if they see a crime about to occur. And we're not going to ask you whether or not where you were born. It has nothing to do with the safety and security of what happens in Seattle. It is a federal responsibility, and quite frankly, we're not a part of that conversation.
Okay. I wanted to wrap up with you, if I could, and talk about this last pillar in your presentation there, this continuous improvement idea, the idea that every organization can make some changes, always trying to improve. That can be a challenge, you know it, for some police departments. And this idea of changing the culture of a law enforcement agency is very difficult. You're new to the SPD. How do you get buy-in within the rank and file from the SPD for that vision there of this possibility of making some changes to the department? And are a lot of changes needed? What can you tell me about that?
I think it starts with understanding change management. And that's something that I have done throughout my entire career. And my philosophy about it is simple. People do not fear change, they fear loss. And so when you're trying to change something or you're trying to make a correction, you have to be able to talk to people and ask them, what are you afraid of losing? Sometimes it is about losing a part of their culture. It's about losing some authority. It's about sharing responsibility, losing those things. But at the end of the day, if it's going to make you safer and make your job meaningful, then that's what we're going to push forward with. Does it make your job safer? Does it make it a little bit easier? And can you go home at night knowing that you did something well for other people? And if the answer is yes, that's the type changes that we're going to make.
All right. Thank you very much, Chief
Thank you,
Shon
Brian.
Barnes.
I appreciate it.
And we will be right back.
What are people saying on social media about what's ahead for Seattle's new police chief? One person writes, "The greatest challenge remains the greatly understaffed SPD. A new chief will change little until police recruitments are again successful." Another person comments, "His main challenge will be breaking the hold on the rank and file by the union and its leader." We'd like to know what you think. Send us an email at contact@seattlechannel.org or find us on social media. Great to get that input. And Chief, thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Chief Shon Barnes from the Seattle Police Department, thanks for being with me. We'll see you next time on City Inside Out.